Hey everyone, this is Mike and today we're going to be talking about Monk. Now this is not going to be the Monk video that a lot of people were expecting because the Monk in Shadowbringers video that has been highly requested by you guys is actually going to be pushed back until 5.4 because as some of you might know, Monk is going to be getting a rework in patch 5.4, so that is basically why I want to be pushing back that video until the rework happens, wait until I get some time to play with the reworked Monk, and then basically talk about my opinions and then give you guys a rundown of the job as it is in 5.4. So basically today I'm going to talk about a little bit what Monk is right now, but more importantly what some of the problems are that I have with the job at the moment. I'm not going to be talking about everything that you need to know about Monk. I'm just going to give you a very quick rundown of basically how it plays. I'm not going to talk about all their off-global cooldowns or raid buffs and whatever they have, because those aren't important for today's discussion that I want to talk about basically. So I'm just going to give you a quick rundown, talk about some of the skills that I feel like don't really have a place with Monk at the moment, or that are counteracting each other, that I feel are a bit weird, or in how they interact with each other. And then I'll also be talking about basically what they have proposed for the 5.4 changes and how they could affect these things about Monk. And I actually think that looking at it, at first I was a little bit concerned about what they would mean for Monk, but on the other hand, I can actually kind of see why they could be a good thing, but more on that later. So if you end up enjoying this video, a like would be super appreciated. And of course, if you're new, hit that subscribe button. Now, when it comes down to Monk right now, it is a very unique melee DPS because it doesn't work with standard combos like the other melees have, or the tanks for that matter as well. So Monk has 3 different forms, and in each form we are going to be having 3 different GCDs that we can use. Now, one of those GCDs is for our AoE rotation, so we don't talk about those. So basically that leaves us with 2 GCDs per form. These are all going to be positionals as well, but we're not going to be talking about that one just yet. So in our first form we have Dragon Kick. This one will grant us the Leaden Fist buff, and our second GCD is called Bootshine. This one will consume this Leaden Fist buff. So basically you're going to be alternating these 2 abilities. In our second form we have Twin Snakes. This one will grant us a attack damage buff that lasts about 15 seconds. I could be wrong in the duration, but basically it'll grant us an attack damage buff. And then we also have True Strike. This one is just gonna do damage. And in our third form we have Demolish. This is a damage over time ability. And we also have Snap Punch. Again, if you need to refresh Demolish, you put that one up. If not, you use Snap Punch. Now, the way Monk was before in Stormblood and Heavensward, we would always be doing Dragon Kick Twin Snakes in our first combo. And then in our second one we would be doing Bootshine and True Strike, because that would basically be alternating the 2. You need to alternate Bootshine and Dragon Kick because Dragon Kick gives you the buff, Bootshine consumes it, so you would always alternate these 2. And with Twin Snakes and True Strike you would be doing the same, because by the time that you would have to refresh your Twin Snakes buff, that would be your second, or basically your third combo at that point, which is why you would be alternating these 2 as well. Now, going into Shadowbringers, with the introduction of our 4th Grease Lightning buff, which I'll talk about Grease Lightning in just a second, meaning that we are now going a lot faster than we did back in Stormblood, and that makes it so that we can actually skip one combo where we applied that Twin Snakes. So basically what we are doing now is we are applying Twin Snakes and then doing 2 True Thrusts or True Strikes before we reapply Twin Snakes again. And this makes it so that you're going to be dancing between the back and the flank of the boss quite a lot, because instead of doing flank random, back random, you can basically now have a mix-up of whatever it is going to be, because you're going to be alternating the first one in your first form, but then in your second form you're going to be doing it once every 3 combos instead of alternating there as well. Now, this isn't necessarily something that I think is a bad thing about Monk, rather I actually quite enjoy it, because going into Shadowbringers they got rid of a lot of our off-global cooldowns, meaning that it is now a much more GCD focused job, and I definitely don't think that that is a bad thing, meaning that right now you have to pay a lot more attention to your buffs, pay a lot more attention to executing your positionals correctly as well, because you are going to be dancing in between the back and the flank a whole lot more than you did before. Then we also have 2 resources that we have to manage. First one is going to be our Greased Lightning. This is basically like the whole core thing about Monk. Every time that you execute an ability in your 3rd form, whether it be your Demolish, your Snap Punch, or Rock Breaker, which is the AoE one, you are going to be getting a stack of Greased Lightning. If you have full stacks executing an ability in your third form will just refresh the Greased Lightning duration. And what this will do for you is, for each stack that you have, you are granted a damage and attack speed buff, meaning that you basically want to stay at maximum stacks at all times, because that grants you the most damage, that grants you the most attack speed. And then our second gauge that we have is our Chakra Gauge. This one is fairly simple. Every time that we hit a crit, there is a chance to open up a chakra, and once you have 5 chakras, you can use the Forbidden Chakra, which will then consume all of those 5 stacks and deal a bunch of damage to the boss. There's also an AoE version called Enlightenment, and those are basically the big things about Monk. We have a very fluent GCD rotation with forms rather than combos. We have this Greased Lightning resource that we want to have at max stacks at all times, and then every time that we crit, there is a chance to open up a chakra that we can then translate into using the Forbidden Chakra when that gauge is full. Now, there are 3 skills that we have to talk about here that feel a little bit weird in the Monk's playstyle. First one being Tornado Kick. This is a very strong off-global cooldown, but whenever you use it, you're actually going to be consuming all of your Greased Lightning stacks. Now, back in Stormblood, Tornado Kick was actually an active part of the rotation because it was very easy to get your Greased Lightning stacks back. Now, the thing about Stormblood was also that we only had 3 Greased Lightning stacks and not 4, so it was a lot easier to get them back. We had more ways to get them back efficiently as well, which is why Greased Lightning was very much so part of the rotation. Now, right now, with having 4 Greased Lightning stacks, with not having as many great tools to get those stacks back quickly either, Tornado Kick has basically become something that we don't use. We use it at the end of the boss fight, right before the boss dies, basically as like a last little burst move that we can use. But outside of that, this is pretty much not used. Second skill is Anatman. This is basically the exact opposite of what you would expect in a Monk rotation. Monk is all about going fast, being very active, moving between the back and the flank all the time, having those fast hitting GCDs, and Anatman just has you stand in place for maybe 9 seconds, and basically you don't do anything. What this does for you is it will grant you Greased Lightning stacks as you are meditating, but the problem is that this is a GCD, first of all, so you need to wait for your GCD to roll over before you can use this, and second of all, it works off the server ticks, meaning you get 1 stack of Greased Lightning every 3 seconds. So if you don't have any Greased Lightning stacks at the beginning of the fight, normally you start with 1 Greased Lightning stack. How you do that I'm not going to talk about, but basically normally when you start a fight you get 1 Greased Lightning stack. But then if you're unlucky with the server ticks of how you timed your Anatman, you could literally be standing still for 9 seconds not doing anything, and that is very much the opposite of what Monk wants to be, which is a very active, fast hitting melee job. And then last but not least, we also have Six-Sided Star. Now, when I first saw this ability, I thought it was really cool because Monk does not have ranged abilities. So Six-Sided Star, what it does is it puts your Greased Lightning back at the maximum duration, and then it gives you a 5-second GCD recast timer. But the skill Six-Sided Star does a lot of damage. So what you would do is you use Six-Sided Star when you have to disengage from the boss, where you know you are going to be losing 1 GCD. So instead of like the other melees would have a ranged attack, Monk uses Six-Sided Star, and then you have a 5-second GCD, and then that 1 GCD that would be your ranged one is basically your Six-Sided Star. Now, the reason why I don't like this ability is because meditation exists. We talked about the chakra stacks before. Basically, meditation is a 1.2 second GCD that you can use to gain 1 chakra charge. So what you would do before Six-Sided Star was introduced into the Monk kit is you would disengage from the boss, and then as you are disengaged, you would be using meditation to get chakra stacks so that when you go back to the boss, you have extra chakra stacks to get closer to your forbidden chakra. Now, the problem here is that both meditation as well as Six-Sided Star are GCDs. So when the 5-second recast of your Six-Sided Star is rolling over, you can't be using meditate. So you can kind of see that both of these skills are counteracting each other. Either you're going to go for the higher potency of Six-Sided Star and you AFK for 5 seconds, or you don't use Six-Sided Star and you start meditating to basically get back to the boss with more meditate stacks. I'm not a Monk pro, I don't know which of the two are more beneficial, but still it feels kind of bad because you have to choose between one of the 2 options that are given to you. Either make it so that meditation just doesn't exist, or make it so that Six-Sided Star still allows you to use meditation, because as it is right now, it feels kind of bad. So those are basically the 3 things that I don't really like about Monk when it comes down to their abilities. Tornado Kick, Six-Sided Star, and Anatman, because they feel kind of weird, because they don't interact well with the rest of your kit. Now, last but not least, there is also one other one that I want to talk about, and that is actually the Twin Snakes buff. Now, as I mentioned before, right now the optimal rotation to do is Twin, True, True, Twin, and not alternating Twin and True Strike. But this isn't really as great as I make it out to be, because the way it works is you're actually going to be losing 1 GCD, which is going to be your Twin Snakes, underneath your damage buff, but it is still worth it because the extra True Strike makes up for the damage loss of reapplying Twin Snakes without the damage buff active. Now, what this also means is that you're going to be having another window, like an off-global cooldown window, without this damage buff, so you can't use off-global cooldowns during that window. And it also means that if you lose even the slightest bit of uptime, your first GCD in your combo is also going to not have that damage buff applied. So you can kind of see where the problem here is. So if you want to optimize the Monk rotation, you need to know where your disconnects in the fight are going to be, because at those points you need to alternate Twin Snakes and True Strike. But then when you do know you're going to be able to have full uptime, that is where you can do the Twin, True, True, Twin rotation instead. Of course, this still means that you're going to have one off-global cooldown window where you can't use anything because your Twin Snakes won't be applied there, and this will also mean that your Twin Snakes reapplication is not going to have that damage buff either. Now, the reason why I don't like this personally is because it doesn't look pretty. It just feels awkward to be sacrificing DPS in one part of your rotation to gain it in another one because of how tight this buff management is. So if they were to change anything about Twin Snakes, I hope that they either decrease the duration by like 2 seconds or increase the duration by 2 seconds, because that would give us a very clear indication that the developers want us to use either the Twin through Twin rotation, the alternation that we have been doing since pretty much the beginning of Monk, I believe, or that they want us to keep doing the new one that we have right now with Greased Lightning 4, which makes it so that we are doing Twin through True Twin instead. So that is basically the change I would like to see there. Now, when it comes down to the proposed change to Monk, it is basically going to be that Greased Lightning, those things that we normally stack up, to become a trait instead. And when I first read this, I thought this was going to be basically destroying Monk, because Greased Lightning has been there since A Realm Reborn, the start of Monk. And it's always been such a core concept on Monk. It's always about keeping your Greased Lightning stacks alive. That was pretty much the whole Monk gameplay. So removing that from the whole rotation, I thought was going to feel very weird. But this could actually be a very good thing, because when it comes down to going into a fight or going into an instance where you don't have your stacks active, like for example, look at Shiva Savage, when she does her cutscene, you're gonna lose all your Greased Lightning stacks. Every time you had a part of like that in a fight, it felt really bad. So having to get your stacks back just because the developers decided to throw in a cutscene feels pretty bad. So that could already remedy that. But looking at some of the other skills that we have, this could actually be a good thing as well, because if Greased Lightning was to be a trait, that means Tornado Kick might function differently now. Maybe Six-Sided Star also gets a new use. It could also be that Anatman gets completely reworked as well. And those are basically the 3 things that I have been complaining about in this video. Now, how they are gonna make it so that Tornado Kick becomes something interactive in your rotation, I'm not 100% sure. Maybe they just make it so that it's an off-global cooldown that you use on cooldown now, or they could make it so that instead of just like having Greased Lightning stacks that you need to spend on your Tornado Kick, maybe every time that you execute an ability in your third form, instead of getting a Greased Lightning stack, you now get something else, and then once that gauge is full, you can use Tornado Kick. Something like that, I think that could be really cool as well. What they would do with Anatman and Six-Sided Star, I'm not 100% sure. Only time will tell for that one, but I do really think that this change that they are proposing with Greased Lightning becoming a trait could actually be for the better when it comes down to the overall playstyle of Monk. And I'm definitely very interested to see what this would actually mean for Monk in the long run as well. So those are pretty much my issues that I currently have with Monk, so to speak. Anatman, Six-Sided Star, Tornado Kick, and then the Twin Snakes buff like being reapplied when the damage buff falls off a little bit earlier, and then basically Greased Lightning becoming a trait. Let me know what you think about that as well, and what you think it might mean for the monk rotation later down the line as well. And then of course, once patch 5.4 rolls around, I'll be sure to make an updated video where I talk about everything that you need to know if you want to get into monk. But that's gonna be it for me for today. I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank my Patreons for supporting me, and I'll see you in the next one.